Presenting Garden in a Box, how to get the most out of your small space this evening. I know some folks have their materials already and some don't, I think. So I'm going to just list off the references that I'm going to be using. And I'm going to use some slides here too. Whoops. And Mary, I think that you will be able to see these slides at a later date on a DVD. So the presentation is meant to guide Garden in a Box participants and other gardeners who want to grow maximum yields in containers and small vegetable gardens. We're referencing specifically tonight chapters 2 and 3 of Smart Gardener, which is a learning guide for home vegetable growers, and that's available at the University of Maine Cooperative Extension. And also How to Grow More Vegetables. And that is a book by John Jevons, and that's available online on a PDF. So you can get the entire book right on the internet, which is great. And it has a bunch of charts and spacing things and whatnot in it that I'm going to include in the slides, and are also in the packet provided by Marilee and Trisha. I'm also referencing a book called Cold Climate Gardening by Lewis Hill, and I did look around to see where that might be available. I believe that there's a copy at the Thompson Free Library. Otherwise, it's an Amazon buy, which is kind of unfortunate, but it's really great for extending your season. Okay, first things to consider when you are starting your garden are your location. So when you get your container, how close is it to your house? How far are you going to have to go away from it to water and fertilize and harvest and bring things inside? You also want to be thinking about where you're going to put it that perhaps gets the most sun, or maybe you are growing a lettuce garden and you want it to get a little bit more shade. A good tip for this is 6 hours is considered full sun. So if it's getting 6 hours of direct sun, awesome. If it's getting, maybe the entire day's worth of sort of dappled sun and maybe 2 to 4 hours of direct sun, that's still going to be okay. You're still going to get something out of that. It's not a shade garden in that point. Another thing to consider is how far are you going to have to go to water it? Where's your hose? How long is your hose? If you're going to have to carry water, you're probably not going to want to carry it far. And then the next thing about your location is soil drainage. And we're going to be mostly growing in containers, but what is underneath your container also matters, because you're going to have water coming out of it. So if you put it in a wet spot, maybe you're going to have to water less. But if you put it on in a dry spot, maybe on the edge of pavement or something, maybe you're going to have a lot of runoff, and it's going to be extra hot. You're going to have to water it more. So that's kind of important too. Even though you're not growing in the ground, your container placement is very important. So when you're considering the plants that you're going to plant, the first thing you want to ask is, what do you want to eat? I mean, some people don't like tomatoes, and you would think tomato would be the thing that you want to grow. So grow the things that you like. Another question is, do you want to grow more than one plant? Because the area that you're going to have, you really can fit more than one plant in. That said, you don't want to overfill your planter. So are you going to be able to fit the plants that you want? in the container. And another question to ask yourself is, if you want to grow more than one type of plant, do the plants grow well together? 'Cause there are certain plants that don't grow well together, and we're going to cover that in the next little bit here. So other things to think about when you're planting your container are your plant size and your root depth. If you're going to grow cool crops or warm crops, the companion planting kit, like if the plants go well together or they don't, and how far apart you need to space them. And this slide has a cool little cross section of a garden bed and what the plants look like above ground and what they look like below ground. So this is a chart in this slide that actually shows root depths. So it shows like a sweet corn root depth of 4 inches. So when you're growing in that small space, we're not just thinking about the plant that's above the ground, we're thinking about the roots that are going under. If your plant gets root bound, for instance, the amount you need to water multiplies exponentially in dry weather. So you can pretty much expect that the size of the roots are typically going to be the same as the size of the above ground plant. So when you're looking at your container and you're thinking about your full size mature plant, you want to be thinking about how much space that's taking up in your soil too. This next chart is taken from the Cold Climate Gardening, and it's a suggested sequence of starting seedlings. So these are times when you would start seeds. We're kind of moving past April here, but there are going to be, you know, our vine crops and whatnot are things that we can plant in May here. And also lettuce. When you're selecting the seeds and plants, you want to keep in mind to what time of year you want to plant. Whoops. Back. What time of year you plan to plant and the days to maturity. So when you're thinking about getting starts, you're going to generally believe that they're planted along this kind of timeline. So you're going to, most plants will have a tag on it that'll say how many days to maturity. So you can with good planning get several crops of different types of plants in the season. So say you plant now some lettuce, some peas, some radishes. Those things tend to die off in July. And at that point, you'll kind of pull those plants out. And then many plants that are cold crops, brassicas and actually greens again and whatnot, you can plant again in those empty spaces and get a fall harvest out of them. The next thing I want to talk about is the companion planting. So plants that like each other, plants that don't like each other. Something that was included in the packet and what you can access through that PDF of the John Jevons book is a list of common garden vegetables and their companions and their antagonists. So these list things that go well together and things that don't go well together. So a lot of times when people think about companion planting, they think about the Three Sisters method, which is pretty widely known, and it's one of the oldest companion planting things that's recorded, and it's a combination of corn and pole beans and squash, and often that was applied in a larger plot. But in this instance, it's really something that could do well in a small space. Corn, maybe not. You're only going to get an ear or two off that. You're not going to pollinate. You know, it's it's sort of not a thing, but you can run a pole in the middle of your container if you wanted to grow some pole beans and use the below area for some squash. Um, one of the things I've seen in the past is people use a sunflower, which is maybe not necessarily food for humans, but food for birds. And I mean, humans can eat the seeds with a little work. Um, so that's kind of a fun way to do that companion planting. Um, there are other plants that grow really well together. Like I like to grow peas with radishes. Um, a lot of times I'll toss some strawberries in there too. Um, spinach is also a lover in that situation, um, which is kind of a delicious salad, all of those things. So we also want to think about plants that are antagonists. And I am actually blocked right now from seeing my list of antagonists because of all of your lovely faces. It's great. Trying to think of some examples, like for instance, your broccolis and cauliflowers and brassica type plants, your kales, they don't really like your vine crops like cucumbers and summer squashes and whatnot. And they'll grow near each other, but they won't thrive near each other. So that's a good example of that sort of thing that you know, if you like broccoli and you plan on growing cucumbers, maybe not this year, or you're going to have to take turns. So when you're planting your plants in this small area, if you do choose to grow more than one type of plant, a lot of your plants will say, give you sort of a spacing guide. And if you're growing multiple different types of plants, those spacing guides are going to vary. So that's where we go back to sort of the thinking about where the roots are. And so some plants are going to take more space than others. Some like more sun than others. And so I've shared some diagrams of how to do a 2-crop companion plant and a 3-crop companion plant. And these are using beans and I cannot see. Everything's popping up over it. Beans and corn, and then I think the other one is,
Hey, Jackie.
yes.
I think you can minimize the gallery of faces if you go to the box and can you minimize us?
Oh, yes. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Yeah, so these charts actually give a circle that shows what the root diameter will be as compared to the what the plant will be too. So that's a good way to kind of just get an idea of what that looks like. So I know that in some of the packets, folks got some graph paper, and that is super helpful. Or just drawing a grid is super helpful. So before you get digging around in your dirt, you take the graph paper, and if you can decide what you're going to use in inches for each box, you can draw each plant out onto that grid using its spacing information and sort of plot it out. And I think you got some dry erase markers, which could be super helpful with you know, mess ups and whatnot, or just like deciding where you're going to reposition things. You know, if you have a super sunny spot and it's south facing, you know, you're going to want to make sure your taller plants go towards the back. If you've got something you want to put in a little bit more shade, you can sort of tuck that in behind something that's a little bit taller. But that helps you playing on that grid. It helps you, sort out what works. And also, keeps you within the parameters of the space you have to work with. So when you're looking at that grid, you can also think about, like I said, what might die off. So if you plant the peas are going to die off in July. Maybe you want to replant peas, or maybe you want to try something else. So you can do multiple different grids for your container throughout the season, which is kind of cool and fun. So some tools that are helpful when you get ready to go ahead and plant your planters. A tape measure and a ruler sometimes are kind of bulky when you're working in a space, and maybe some of you have I know that a couple people were building containers, so maybe your container is square, maybe your container is round. There's a few different things that I use that are more flexible to that sort of situation. So one of the things that I like is just a little square or a little triangle out of cardboard, and you can size that to any size you need, and then place it in your bed and just kind of keep flipping it to space your plants apart. Another thing, you can use a muffin tin, also chicken wire, string. If you do, just kind of drape the string over the top of your container. Maybe you put some tape around the outside so you're not jostling it. And then you can just remove your grid afterwards. And that can really help you, if you do it sort of in scale to your grid pattern that you made on your graph paper, it helps you with your plant spacing. I think that's it. I think I'm going to be ready for questions. I know that Marilee and I talked a little bit about when plant and seed requests are due. This slide says the 29th, but I think we're going to push it out a little bit later because we ended up postponing a little bit. Yeah, I think I'm ready for questions. Anyone has any?
I just unmuted everybody.
Hi, this is Mary. I was just wondering how we can what to put underneath our bed. Can we use a pallet or something?
Sure, I think you could use a pallet if you have one.
I do have one, and I thought maybe it would drain better that way,
Yeah,
And then if I need to move it, then I can move it if I needed to.
Sure, I think that's a great idea.
Okay, yeah. So I think I'll use a pallet when I get the bag to put the dirt in, yeah. So I have a good place for it, so I think I'm all set that way.
Do you have an idea already of what you think you want to grow?
Do I have an idea what I want to grow? Yes.
Mm-hmm.
I want to grow 2 tomatoes, if I can get them in there, and sort of a salad garden, like with radishes maybe, and lettuce, and some different things like that. Maybe a cucumber or 2. Not too many things, but just a variety. Hello? I lost her.
You're still here. We're still here.
Oh, okay.
I've been trying to mute and unmute people so that we don't get
Okay.
echo. Sorry about
Oh, okay. That's all right.
That does help on the echo, Trisha, when you're muting people. That's great. Thank you.
Anybody else have a question? I can see other people, so if you put up your hand, I can unmute you. There we go.
Yeah, I think I have a space right next to my kitchen door. It has the hose all right there, and I'm gonna do what Mary's. I've got a couple of pallets, small ones. I put the container on that, and then I can water it, and it gets full sun as well. And I'm gonna go kind of. I want to have tomatoes, and I wanted to have cucumbers and green beans. Would you think that would be too much for that small container?
I think if you have just one plant of each thing, you should be okay.
Okay, all right.
That is an ideal little spot there, Debbie.
Yes, yeah. Oh, I know. What about deer and getting into this stuff?
Oh, gee. When Michael does a haircut, spread the hair around. They don't like that.
He doesn't do hair anymore.
He doesn't. Well,
No,
tell him to start again.
I don't think I can talk him into that.
I don't blame you. Another thing they don't like is like Irish Spring soap. They don't really like
Okay.
the smell of soap.
Okay,
They're really hard to deter. If they
I know.
want it, they're gonna go for it.
Yeah, okay.
They don't like garlic. Deer don't like garlic. At least
Oh,
they
they
never
don't?
touched my garlic. So put a couple of garlic plants or onion things in there.
A couple of people have asked about trying to grow garlic in a container, and I have, I've never done it. I don't know how that would. It's usually something planted in the fall and harvested in the spring. But so I don't know anything about like growing a spring planted garlic. Do you, Jackie?
I don't. Usually when I do that, I just grow it for the scape part of it. But with everyone's container, I mean, there's no reason why at the end of the season you can't plant garlic in that container. I've definitely done them in like a raised bed. So, I mean, why wouldn't it be okay in a container?
My concern would be that the container would freeze solid
Yeah, yeah.
where it doesn't in the soil.
I wonder if it were, hey, were mulched somehow, you know? I mean, usually I mulch my garlic down pretty heavily. Yeah, I think it would depend on where you put it.
Yeah.
But usually my garlic freezes solid.
Oh, Susan's talking.
Yeah.
Start that
So
again. Susan.
garlic is frozen solid. What?
So just start that again.
Garlic is frozen solid because it's only 4 inches below the surface. So it freezes hard. So it wouldn't matter if it was in a container or a raised bed or in the ground. It's going to freeze solid. Yeah.
I think that'd be a great thing to do at the end of the season. And then everyone has something first thing in the spring too, you know?
It will depend a little bit on whether we end up taking the containers back and trying to rejuvenate the soil for next year, or what. I think haven't
Fair
gotten
enough.
that part all
Yeah, yeah.
out yet.
We'll put the cart before the horse there,
Shall
but it
we?
would be great.
It's definitely something that would be worth trying. Okay, shall we? Looks like we have gotten through. Does anyone have any last questions? Oh, Mary
Mary.
got her hand up for a question. I thought she was just being friendly.
She is friendly.
Well, I'm not a participant, but I am curious about this idea of a salad garden and incorporating a cucumber and lettuce. In my mind, one cucumber seed produces more than one cucumber on the vine, right?
Sure.
Yeah. Okay, good. And so, thinking about space, would somebody have to periodically like move the vine around, or can you just drape it over the side? Because then I was thinking about a cucumber plant encroaching possibly on a lettuce, which might want to fan out as much as it possibly could. I'm sure if you did a cucumber and a lettuce and a tomato, the tomatoes and the cucumbers are so viney. My fear would be that there would be competition for the lettuce to be able to fan out as much as it wanted to. But could you drape the tomato over the side and the cucumber over the side, and then the lettuce could grow big?
Lettuce generally likes a little bit of shade in the heat of summer if it's going to keep going. So it's sort of one of those things that you let get a little bit of shade. And a cucumber is going to have a mind of its own. You're going to want it to go over the edge and down the side, and you're probably going to have to tell it that you want it to do that.
Right. Right. So guiding it with maybe sticks or something like
No, just picking it up like overnight. Sometimes it'll vine out quite a bit. So
Okay.
you'll go check it. Most people check it every day, every 2 days, recommended anyway. And when you see it happening like that, you just kind of coax it out where you want it to go. Just like we train our pets, we train plants too.
I thank you. That's I like that. Yeah, that's wonderful. Okay.
I think that cucumbers are probably easier to train than tomatoes.
Yes, that is indeed true.
Yeah, that's good to know. I know we've got some other gardeners that couldn't join us tonight that are interested in both of those plants, so that's helpful. And yeah. And so really, and I think one last question I have from somebody that wasn't able to attend tonight was just thoughts on how much to plant. When you responded to Debbie, I think it was, you wanted to grow the 1 tomato, 1 cuke, and 1 green bean plant. So the idea is that for a lot of folks that want to grow a variety of things, maybe 3 of different varieties of plants. But if you want to just have lettuce, you could grow much more, you could put many more seeds in your container of lettuce. If you're just growing 1 crop, you can put more seeds in your container, right?
Correct.
Okay. I think that, okay. Okay.
Debbie, did you have another?
Yeah, I was gonna ask, since I wanted to have cubes and green beans, I know that the tomato plants will be the seedlings or whatever, but should I try starting the green beans and the cubes by seeds? I'm not really cool with that, doing that.
Oh, I don't think so. I think, Marilee, maybe you can answer that. We're gonna do some seedlings too, yes?
We are going to do our best to get seedlings. Yes, we will.
Okay.
We're going to do our best to have that option available. I do know that lots of our gardeners, some of our gardeners prefer having seedlings started. So you're not alone in that, Debbie, at
Okay.
all. And as we've been on this call, I've been writing down people's ideas of seed orders. And so knowing that you would like seedlings across the board is very helpful. And Trisha, yes.
I just want beans are not something that you can transplant. They don't like it. Like beans, you gotta plant the seed. And
Okay, I'm gonna interrupt because last year I had miracle beans. They were started in a tray. They got frozen to the point they had no leaves on them at all. And I still planted them, and they were the best bearing beans I've had ever. I don't know what happened. But they did amazing.
Okay. Well, if you can find bean seedlings, great. But I know we've got bean seeds.
You do have seeds.
Yeah, I know I have bean seeds. I had not ever seen bean seedlings for sale, so I kind of didn't think thing. So,
I think Kirby Ellis does it. I think that's where they came from.
All righty.
I would like to just, Mary, are you still with us? How are you?
I am.
Oh, wonderful. Good. I wanted to check in with you because I know that you have a little experience with tomatoes and peppers, and I can't remember from our last workshop if you are looking forward to direct seeding or if you'd prefer seedlings. Do you know?
Well, I prefer seedlings with some, like tomatoes, peppers, but I usually use seeds for cucumbers and beans and lettuce. But I would try either one.
Okay. Yeah, well, it's really what, this is designed so that it's your preference really is what we're endeavoring to support. So that's good information.
Yeah, I've tried a lot of different things, but I'm willing to learn to do different things, with the seeds or with the seedlings, yeah. So.
All right.
Last year in the school garden, with lettuce, we started some ahead of time. I was working with second graders. So we started lettuce inside, oh, I forget how many weeks it was ahead of transplant. And then we also, when it got a bit warmer, we direct seeded in the garden. And we ended up, the crop that was direct seeded was actually nicer than the transplants, even though the transplants had a head start and all of that. The plants were happier being direct seeded. Just
I sort of think that is a good general rule for lettuces and, I mean, radishes and even beans. I mean, that was kind of a fluke last year, weird that
Sure.
happened, but yeah, I mean, those things really want to be in dirt.
Yeah.
it is miraculous how much food you can get from one tiny seed. It really is amazing.
I think another time it would be fun to do a learning series on seeds, just seeds alone, because they all look so different. And obviously they have, they're created, they've designed themselves for, certain purposes, but I just think they're fascinating. Definitely fascinating. Like Swiss chard seeds, my God, they're like, velociraptor, dinosaur, psyche. Very interesting seeds. Very interesting.
Well, are we exhausted ourselves?
I think so.
I think so.
All righty, I'm gonna stop recording.